Hello, everyone. Wonderful to be here. Before I get into my remarks, I noticed that when I came in, the little bowl of water where you could put a stone commemorating somebody who had passed or sadness. And I just want to take a second because it fits into the theme of the book even about diversity. A lady passed away yesterday on CNN, a woman named Alice Stewart. Now, I'm a liberal, very, very liberal, grew up in a liberal family where we got along with everybody. Alice Stewart was this correspondent, correspondent with whom I didn't agree on politics. But she was so kind, always had a smile, was never angry at anybody. And that was the sort of politics I grew up with, where at our table at home, we had Republicans and Democrats, we had people of a wide range of politics. And I thought that is the kind of person I would have liked to have had at my table, even though we often seriously disagreed. And so I just wanted to take that second to mention the stone I put in there for Alice. Because I think it fits in with what I read about your church. When we were first communicating, you shared with me, Ms. Dittmar, a quote from the founder of your church that talked about the power of diversity. And I thought I would begin my remarks by talking about why am I so interested in diversity? And I grew up with it, so why me? I run a project on Black history. Why that? Why is a white guy doing that? So my story on the interest in diversity goes back to when I was 8 years old. So it's a child's story. I was living in Egypt at the time. My father was stationed at the embassy. I was born in Lebanon, by the way. And my dad was at the U.S. Embassy, and war broke out. And we were evacuated, mother and I, across the desert at night in a convoy under fire, artillery fire from the distance. And we got into Alexandria, and we were transferred to a bus, and the bus was strafed by a warplane. I can remember the windows being blown out. And then we finally got to the harbor area, and the U.S. Navy was waiting for us right there, and we were transported by landing craft, kind of World War II kind of stuff, to the Chilton, which was this warship waiting for us. And we went out under bombardment through a minefield, eventually getting to Naples. That's a lot of drama for an 8-year-old kid. And growing up in the Middle East, I was around drama my whole life. We were shot at when I was an infant. I don't remember it very well, but I had the pictures of the building being shot at in Lebanon. So I asked my father when he flew out to Naples a few weeks later, why are people trying to kill me and my mom? So my father and mother were veterans of World War II, and they tried to put the context of war into terms that a child could understand. And their view, and my father's view in particular, who had seen a lot of combat as an ambulance driver in North Africa and the Middle East, he said that war came about because people refused to try to understand other people. They didn't take the time to understand the differences between people, black and white, religion, and so forth. He had gone through an experience as a kid where he dated a Jewish girl, and an anti-Semitic member of the family attacked him for it, and they had to split up. And so he felt that it's important to try to understand other people. So when I read the message that you sent me from your founder, that resonated with me, partly because of the violence going on now in the Middle East, that's how I grew up. That's why I, a white guy, really care about the black community. Because I didn't know a lot about the black community, and I've learned a lot of it through this research of going through thousands and thousands of records that were found in the training center on Union Street next to the Union Cemetery. This cache of records is a true civil rights treasure on white and black education during a terrible time in our history of segregated education. But it's also a testament to the intense bravery and determination of the black community of Loudoun County for equality and for education. And when I was researching it, word got out over time. The superintendent asked me to do a study for the entire county because of a study I had done earlier of the Prosperity Baptist Church in Conklin, which is right next to South Riding on Braddock Road. And various newspapers found out about it. Found it in the Washington Post, heard about it. And this was just before COVID struck. So front page story in Washington Post, followed by a lot more inside the paper. So it's a major paper, big deal, right? It was a big deal because a few weeks later, not that long, not even 2 weeks later, someone from Georgetown University Press contacted me. And they said, Mr. Roeder, we'd like to talk to you about your research. And it wasn't just my research. My research is a team research. Black and white folks. We have somebody there who is a Japanese American. We have someone there who's from Nepal. It's a truly integrated team studying this important part of American history. And they said, we want to come on and interview. So they did. And then they asked us to write this book, Dirt Don't Burn. Dirt Don't Burn comes from a phrase from a black teacher who in the 1950s was trying to heat her one-room schoolhouse in Willisville in the western part of the county, far part of the county. And it was a terrible winter. Kids were freezing. There's no wood. There's no coal to heat the one-room schoolhouse. He kept asking the superintendent, I need to heat the schoolhouse. And nothing happened. Finally, she had to point out the obvious. You can't burn dirt. And so that rang a bell, and he supplied the coal that she needed. I met her in, 2018, because I was trying to put together a conference on segregated education. And my team and I met with her, and we agreed that we were going to condense that long, elegant sentence that she had written into 3 words, Dirt Don't Burn, to convey the pathos, the emotion of not having enough food, not enough food, but there wasn't a lot of food, but not enough wood and coal to heat a schoolhouse. The records that I have discovered, and our team has discovered and analyzed, tell the same story of people standing up for their rights as American citizens to be treated equally. It begins, of course, with Edwin Washington, who wanted the story I told to the children right there, wanted to get an education just to simply read and write and do a better job as a waiter. But in the early days of education between 1865 and 1870, the Quakers were really the place to go for education. These people really believed in that philosophy, and they also taught blacks, you are American citizens. You have a constitution that gives you rights. It's written down, one of which is the right to ask for redress of grievances through a petition. And they did that. Now, try to imagine during those days of intense racial disparity and hatred, in fact, writing a document to the white government. You can't even speak to the school board because you can't vote. Unless you register to vote, you can't. That was hard to do, register to vote if you're black. So they would go from farmhouse to farmhouse and finally go to a Sunday meeting like here and get folks to sign a petition to the white government saying, I want something. I want, for example, a repair to my schoolhouse. I want a road put in front of my schoolhouse. I want better food. I want better education, and so forth. Think of the guts of folks during those days to do that. Washington Post heard about that. They said, that's a national story. And so did Georgetown. They said, I said, I'm sure that the black community and many, many communities, many of which I've met doing this research, have done the same thing. But here we have actual documents, physical documents of this particular community in Loudoun County, my community, who have done that. One of the things they wanted was a high school education. Whites very early on had access to high school lectures. There wasn't really a white high school until 1910. But blacks didn't have that. But they still wanted those lectures. And it was possible to get them with permission of the white school board. And in 1892, Annie Rivers got that permission. So this is a girl, by the way, getting a high school lecture, which is pretty unusual anyway. But she was unusual because she was the daughter of a spy, a Union spy. And the black community insisted she needs to have this, and she got it. Now, that's just one lecture, but it's like the whole story is a set of stepping stones, constantly pushing to get equality and education for everyone. In 1920, this is a great story now, John C. Walker, you'll like this because it has to do with a church. John C. Walker was a Sunday school teacher in Leesburg, and he was asked to start the very first black high school in Loudoun County. That was not Douglas High School. That was the second floor of the training center on Union Street by the cemetery. And it wasn't a accredited high school, clearly not accredited. It was clearly underfunded, but it was a program. So let's call it a high school program. But it was eventually accredited just before Douglas. Second floor, very limited program. In order for him to teach chemistry, nothing was going to come from the government. He had to go to the black community for them to donate their beakers and pans and so forth to teach chemistry and biology. But he did it anyway. He did something else in 1920. If you know your American history, you know that in 1920 and the 20s, blacks were being lynched regularly. I mean, there was big posters on it in New York City, buildings about X number of people lynched today. This gentleman led every black teacher and student through the center of Leesburg, a southern capital, in 1920. The peaceful march celebrating education. Now that's guts. That's bravery. And this is a fellow who has been forgotten in history. We discovered him through faint pencil markings on old school documents. What is this parade they're talking about? And we discovered it was written about in the newspapers. It was a peaceful parade. But we were just astounded. I mean, I've been around the world where I've seen people killed for a lot less in parts of the world that have no civil rights. And here, where we knew there were troubles, this guy did that, and the whole community did that. So it is, what we do in the Edwin Washington Society is an homage, not just to Edwin Washington, but also to this gentleman and to all the other blacks who are forgotten. Because it's important to remember them, like Edith Harris in 1930. Edith Harris was from Pennsylvania, university educated, and she came to teach at that school because of what? Petitions. They wanted a better teacher. Not a criticism of the fellow who was there. They just wanted a university educated teacher to come down and expand the education. And she sure did. She taught blacks about international law and why they were in a situation, talk about sexualism, and she talked about how folks overseas thought about enslavement and so forth. They hadn't heard that before, not from an educator. Then in 1944, we're rushing forward now, there was a gentleman there called Oscar Emmerich. Now, Mr. Emmerich was the superintendent of the Loudoun County Public Schools from 1917 to 1957. It's quite a swath of time. And he was an ardent segregationist from the Plessy versus Ferguson definition. He believed in separate but equal, and he took that literally. He complained, actually, a number of times that things were not equal. He believed you could be equal and separate. And he wrote in 1944 to the school board and the board of supervisors that things were not equal. And that because there was true discrimination, if that wasn't fixed, remember this is 10 years before Brown versus Board of Education, if that's not fixed, the courts were going to take the school system away. So he was a segregationist. We don't like that. But he had the brains and the foresight to understand that it was coming to an end, unless you made things truly equal, which they couldn't be. That was one of the lessons of Brown versus Board of Education, the Supreme Court ruling, that you can't be equal and separate. So, 1951, let's go back to the training center. Training center is this two-story building built in 1882, 1883. To go to a toilet, you had to go to the outside to outhouses. Other schools had flush toilets. They had outhouses. And so you have 2 stories, and you have faculty and visitors and kids having to go in and out all the time, all weather, going to an outhouse. Now, sure, there were a lot of outhouses in Loudoun County at the time. It's a rural county. I get that. But just think of the traffic problems, so people wanted to go to the bathroom all the time in that kind of weather. And so they said, we need flush toilets. We deserve it. And the white government said, no, we haven't got any money for that. It's not going to happen. Enter a gentleman, passed away now, but his grandson is part of our board of directors, Mr. Brown. Mr. Brown was born on an Indian reservation, Indiana, but went by Conestoga wagon as a kid to another town, and went to an integrated high school, picked cotton, And after he graduated from high school, he and his other friends rented an old Model T and some old tires, played musical instruments, and drove across the country to Washington, D.C., where he entered Howard University and worked through Howard University and Howard Law School scrubbing floors. There's an American story for you. And his first case was here in Loudoun County, getting toilets. Can you believe that? You have to actually go to court to get toilets. He went to federal court. The threat of that lawsuit, the temerity that a white government would refuse to give toilets to these people, turned things around. Those toilets are there today in the bottom of that school. They're restoring it. I hope they keep those toilets, because they, as humble as a toilet is, that is a monument, again, to the determination of an American people, black community of Loudoun County, to get what they deserve. And you can read about it in Dirt Don't Burn. Finally, I want to mention in 1956, so things are coming to an end on segregation. There's still some time to go. Integration didn't arrive till, 1968? But the writing was on the wall. And the white government, and there I'm meaning the school board and the board of supervisors, said to the black community, we know that you want improvements. We've made some improvements for you. We'll give you all the other improvements, better teachers and so forth. All you need to do is give us one little concession. Let's keep segregation going. And they said no. In fact, they said, hell no. We're Americans. They took those lessons that they learned in the Quaker community back when Edwin Washington was going to school, that they kept along the way, that we deserve equality. That's sort of the lesson of your founder, I believe. And they said, we're not doing it. We want integration. We want equality. We are Americans who want to be treated as Americans. That is the story of Dirt Don't Burn. It's an American story. Now, my team travels around. We've gone to Atlanta University to find records in Loudoun County. We've gone to Howard University, Hampton University, and other universities. I lecture in other states on what happened in Loudoun County. Next month, I'm going to Toledo, Ohio, to talk to a conference of educators from the lower 48 on what happened right here in Loudoun County, because it is a national story. I hope you buy the book. I know it sounds very commercial, but not for me, because the receipts for that go to Black Research, and they go to the mission that your church talks about, which is, and my father talked about during that war in '56. We need to learn about other people, and that's why a white guy is running a program on black education, because by doing that, I learned more about my neighbors, and that makes me stronger, I think. Thank you very much. And my best friend over here, Barry Harrelson, and I will be happy to answer any questions you might have. And I need some water.
I will bring you the mic if you have a question. Okay, I saw his. Maybe give your name too.
Hi, my name is John Gallant. My question is about the Confederate military leader, John Mosby. The highway used to be named for him, and they wisely changed the name. My understanding is that Mosby was interesting in that after the Civil War was over, he was very open about the fact that he was on the wrong side. He said he got it wrong, he was sorry, and he sort of repented. So my question is, if you know about this part of history, how rare was that? Have you come across others in your research who figured out that they were on the wrong side?
Go ahead, Barry. Why don't you talk, then I'll talk.
Yeah. Wait. Oh, either one.
There's a mic over there somewhere.
This is a better mic, actually.
Okay.
Don't put it near that mic.
Okay, I'll stay away from there. There were others, Southern leaders and all, but they were drowned out by the push for the lost cause, and that led to most of the statues and various other naming. Now, I'd have to look, while Mosby did do it, as you said. I was familiar with that. The naming of the road by him had nothing to do, obviously, with that. Matter of fact, it was ignored because the naming was to establish the lost cause as a righteous cause in American history. And the statues, almost all of them, went up with that kind of approach in the late 1890s, early part of the 20th century. And the push was, in a way, to intimidate, to say, we still are in control. So that's why the very few went up to truly honor someone like him.
You know, the United Daughters of the Confederacy put up a lot of statues in front of courthouses, on street corners, to commemorate what I consider a romanticized version of the Confederacy. And there's been this big debate about whether statues should be taken down. Some years ago, I attended a rally, an NAACP rally at the courthouse, with the intent of arguing that that statue should be taken down. There are statues out there that commemorate very brave people, and I don't want to take away bravery from anybody regardless of the cause. That statue, however, wasn't representing a particularly brave individual. It was representing a lost cause that was wrong, a cause that, if you read the writings of the people who founded the Confederacy, it was about enslavement. It was not about the North versus the South and a lot of other nonsense. It was about the right to own people as property. And I proposed an alternative statue at the time, which was to be two kids walking up a hill representing the struggle for equality. Now that didn't work. Politics weren't there. Later on, Phyllis Randall, who is our esteemed chairman of the Board of Supervisors, managed to get that statue down. Later on, I became a member of a committee, along with Alvin over here, that restored Douglas High School. I was very proud to be part of that, and presented that same design, which with a lot of adaptation and improvements became the statue that is now standing as of a few days ago in front of Douglas. But it represents the opinions of a lot of people. I mean, I did the original design, but people added on wonderful features to it, including a sculpture. I recommend, if you're interested in that struggle, the symbol of it, and the struggle of the black community, this statue represents all of the ancestors that fought for equality. It's two kids, but every adult was a kid at one time. And so I recommend you get in front of Douglas sometime and take a look at it. That's your ancestors, Alvin, and everybody else's ancestors who fought for being an American.
Thank you. Here we have a question from John Botts.
Yes, thank you very much for coming today. We can learn a lot from you and reading your book. I was wondering if your book covers this particular period in time, or because when I've met there are folks in Percival, Reggie Sims and his brother, and another fellow, Lewis, I can't remember his last name, but Lewis had clippings of back in the 20s when the Klan was very big and had rallies there in Percival. And it was just amazing that, that kind of thing was happening. And I don't, obviously you don't want to give away everything about your book, but I was curious if it covered that period of time.
I'm certainly aware of the Klan in Percival, and some of that's mentioned in the book. It's not a major feature, but the Klan is still here, unfortunately, and occasionally leaves vile language, plastic bags with stuff on people's driveways. My wife read an email message to me one time where I was called a white hater for doing this project. And she says that, one of these days the Klan's going to put up a cross in front of our house and burn it. And I said, that's okay. We're going to make it a fundraiser for the Edwin Washington Society. So, I mean, if the black community with no resources can stand up to what they had to stand up to, I can surely stand up to the Klan today. And so that's my message there. I'm inspired by the Black community every day. Yes, ma'am.
Which one?
So often the history of finding local resources is just like you described, finding them under layers of poop and affected by moisture. And so that history is lost because those records aren't available. And I'm wondering what your group is doing to make those original records
Yes.
available in a wider basis so that more people who are interested in history can absorb that local color into the narrative.
That's a wonderful question. It is actually the main theme of my remarks when I go to Toledo next month, when I talk to the community of educators around the country. So, what are we doing? So we have these records. They are dusty old records. If you open the boxes, are you not hearing me?
Like that one there?
Huh?
Like the,
Yeah, like this one right here. I found this inside the inside and outside wall of the training center. 20 of them, actually, like that. So the records would fill up this wall over here. So my job is to put them in archival boxes at our expense. School system doesn't pay us anything. They gave us space to work in for free. That's worth a lot. They gave us full access to the records, 100%. But it's our job to raise the funds to restore them. So first thing is, find what do we have? What are the records? They were out of order. And so Barry and I both have master's degrees in library science at Catholic University. That's how we met. And then we have a team of people with a variety of degrees or just people off the street who are interested in history. I invite all of you to become volunteers. I can train you, and maybe you have other trainings as well. So what do we have? So we've developed a catalog. And this catalog is going to be digitized. All the records are being digitized, scanned. And we have a modern database being used. Once you put metadata and other information on there, it's going to take us about a year to finish that. I hope to have it done by the end of this year. So we have a lady with a couple of master's degrees in that area who is managing it, but we have a whole team of people cataloging each document. If you can imagine, over 10,000 documents we're going through, and we're just volunteers. This is paid for through donations, like your contribution today, and my wallet, so forth. That's what pays for it. The other thing is, where are the schoolhouses? So when I started the research, when the superintendent, Patrick, said, we'd like you to tell the story of what happened to all of Loudoun County, well, where were those schoolhouses? Some of them we know, right? But some of them have been forgotten in time. So we've identified where they all were. This goes from 1968 back to before Reconstruction, where there were no public schools before 1870. So Quaker schools and private situations that existed. And we've been putting them on a digital map. So we have an expert, a cartographer, who has a master's degree, who has developed a digital map in which each of these are placed. If you click on a spot, let's say the Conklin Colored School or the Sterling White School, then a little pop-up will come up and it will show you a photograph of that schoolhouse if we have one, something about that schoolhouse, and then a link to a web page on our site that would discuss the schoolhouse in detail. From there, you could go to the database and learn a lot more information. So let's say that we talk about transportation on the web page, you can then click and go into the database and search for documents on transportation and go back and forth. That's how we're making it available to the world. And we hope that this will be a model for other communities as well. It's one of the reasons we're going out there in Toledo is to address that idea of this integrated digital system. And thank you so much for that question. Am I out of time?
we kind of are.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, and
Thank
thank you.
so much, Larry.